Atlanta didn't just burn that night, it exploded. The air felt electric, thick with anticipation, as if the city itself knew something monumental was about to unfold. Inside the chaos, a whisper twisted into a headline. The headline became a storm, and the storm erupted into a full-scale inferno that engulfed every corner of the Bravo universe. Then, a corrupted clip emerged, jagged, distorted, impossible to ignore. A voice that sounded eerily like Porsha, a shadow moving like Todd, and 5 words that sent shockwaves through fans and insiders alike. I miss my cycle. It's his. Those words alone detonated timelines, fractured communities, and made Atlanta feel less like a city and more like the epicenter to a seismic event that refused to settle. In seconds, what had been casual whispers in group chats became accusations splashed across social media. DMs flooded at a speed that made comprehension nearly impossible. Whole fan communities disappeared and then returned louder than ever, hungry for clarity, for proof, for justice. And right in the middle of this chaotic blast stood Kandi Burruss, caught in a marriage that now felt like a crime scene, a scene she never agreed to inhabit. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was war, online, offline, and everywhere in between. Before the audio, before the viral clip, before the internet anointed its newest monster, there were receipts. Not rumors, not gossip, not clickbait. Real evidence, tangible and threatening, messages that didn't ask for mercy, they demanded attention. A screenshot, a line of text, a message sent with full awareness of its power. Finally got my phone back on. It's been broken for 3 days. By the way, I've been laughing every day since Queens. We were turned up for real. Just want you to know I'm not going to rape you on camera, so no worry. Those words didn't read like nervous typing. They read like precision, calculated, sharp. And while the casual observer might have glanced and scrolled past, those who knew the stakes understood immediately. This was more than words. This was a warning. Kandi, at the center of the storm, felt déjà vu in its cruelest form. The tension wasn't new. It had been building quietly, lurking in past glances, half smiles, subtle exchanges. It now emerged in the form of text, digital, permanent, unavoidable. Then came the audio. Messy, glitched, distorted, clipped. But clarity wasn't required. All that mattered were 4 sentences that ripped through the Bravo world like a hurricane. I'm late, and it's Todd's. No explanation, no proof, just impact. The timeline fractured in real time. By sunrise, leaked chats became public accusations. Fan pages morphed into war rooms, teeming with strategy, analysis, and judgment. Blogs erupted like sirens in the dead of night, dissecting every word, every pause, every tone. And in the eye of this digital hurricane, Kandi watched as her marriage was torn apart in real time, subjected to an online autopsy she never consented to. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was war. Online, offline, and everywhere in between. And as the digital storm raged, one truth became unavoidable. This collapse didn't happen overnight. It had been building, quietly and relentlessly behind closed doors. Friction had been simmering, scenes had felt off, glances had lingered too long, laughter had carried tension. For weeks, even months, pressure had been mounting. Dinners, private conversations, moments captured on camera, all of it had been silently fueling the inevitable detonation. 2 women, once linked by friendship and proximity, now stood on opposite sides of an invisible chasm, separated by fire that no screen could contain. Kandi, Porsha, and Todd weren't characters in a scripted scene. Their lives, their reputations, and their privacy were weaponized in real time. And when accusations as explosive as the one claiming an attempt to drug someone enter the room, there is no path back to normalcy. Words like poisoning, drugging, manipulation, these are not playful drama lines. They are legal, moral, and existential threats. Nothing in that moment remained casual. Nothing could be softened by a laugh or a camera angle. By the time Kandi rose from her seat, the room had shifted entirely. Not theatrically, not for an audience, but with the weight of grief, anger, and betrayal pressing down. She moved toward Porsha, not as a character, not as part of a storyline, but as someone confronting a wound that had been left raw and bleeding. Security rushed in. Producers yelled. Directors waved their hands frantically. Cameras shook with the gravity of the moment. And then Todd entered, a man meeting the sudden realization that his life, at least the version of it that existed in public perception, might already be over. His words were simple. "If that child belongs to me, it's finished." No music, no staged interview, just raw, unmediated impact. And Kandi? She didn't scream, she didn't lash out. She folded onto the floor, the embodiment of mourning, where betrayal doesn't resemble entertainment, it resembles devastation. Every observer understood. This wasn't something resolved before the credits rolled. This was a fracture that would redefine the series and everyone involved. Just when it seemed the storm might settle, another recording emerged. The cameras went dark, but the fallout didn't. Screenshots multiplied. Audio clips slid into inboxes like landmines. Burner accounts appeared with bios claiming, "I was there and they fooled you." And at the eye of this storm, Todd, not accused, not defended, but omnipresent, silent, like a shadow threading through every theory, every rumor, every post. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a tactical operation. Leaks, recordings, messages, they weren't random, they were precise, calculated, designed to maximize impact. Every whisper, every clip, every document had its purpose, and fans, once spectators, became investigators. They combed through old footage, dissected past interviews, scrutinized body language frame by frame. A glance became evidence, a pause became proof, and in doing so, the narrative, carefully constructed by producers and lawyers, became untethered from reality. However, the moment she finally addressed the rumor, it wasn't a soft denial or a fleeting excuse. It was war. "I would have never said anything about Porsha," she said, her voice steady, her eyes unyielding, had she not shaded me, saying I'm an undercover lesbian. "Let's be clear, I have had a girl-on-girl experience, nothing hidden. I am happily married, but that happened." That single statement detonated the foundation of trust and friendship built over years. Facts no longer mattered. The audience stopped debating truth, they debated intent. Because when an allegation goes public, it no longer belongs to the people involved. It belongs to the internet, and the internet does not wait for nuance, context, or explanation. It reacts first and judges later. This was urgency, intensity, and high stakes. Denial, when delivered like this, doesn't end a story, it animates it. The faster, the harder, the more certain, the more the audience assumes there is something to hide. Comment sections evolved into war rooms. Bloggers, TikTok editors, reaction channels, they all dissected the moment. Loops, pauses, frame-by-frame analysis, highlighted expressions. It wasn't just an accusation anymore, it was a fracture, and that fracture carried confidence, precision, and consequence. Support or destroy, there was no middle ground. Kandi didn't stop there. She broadened the narrative, transforming it from a moment into a battle of credibility and identity. She pointed toward the person behind the words, invoking Porsha's documented opinions, past statements, and on-camera contradictions. The narrative wasn't about denying an allegation anymore. It was about addressing motive, history, and character. "I don't feel it was a problem," she said, but she emphasized the person behind the claim, the history of contradictions and pretense, the subtle power plays. The audience wasn't asking whether it happened anymore. They were asking why it was said and what purpose it served. Was it revenge? Clout? A personal grievance? Sometimes fights begin long before cameras catch them, simmering in private, quietly setting the stage for public explosion. By the time reality TV picks it up, the rot has already been years in the making. Then came contradiction, the detail that made fans lean in closer. Kandi referenced messages, texts allegedly sent days after the incident, indicating consent, fun, and boundaries. Not proof, not screenshots, just suggestion, and that one word, contradiction, shifted the narrative dramatically. When one version of events exists publicly and another privately, the audience doesn't simply consider who is lying, they assume someone is hiding. Reality TV transforms into a courtroom, and viewers become jurors, lawyers, and detectives, analyzing tone, body language, context, and timing. Silence, especially, becomes a story in itself. When Feedom didn't respond publicly, fans watched her absence like testimony, interpreting non-reaction as indication. In gossip culture, silence is never neutral, it is evidence, and evidence is combustible. Emotions escalated further when Kandi allowed disappointment to show. "I've never wanted to have a bad relationship with her," she admitted. "I've always wanted to see her win." Disappointment strikes differently than rage. Rage fights, disappointment fractures. And in that moment, the audience stopped debating truth or rumor, they picked sides. Reality TV was no longer entertainment, it was emotional warfare. Multiple narratives emerged simultaneously, public statements versus private interactions, on camera versus off camera. The story had escaped control, and trust, perception, and credibility became currency. Meanwhile, production kept rolling. Music cuts sharpened tension, zooms lingered, pauses extended, reactions were framed to feel intentional, and the fans noticed. Suspicion grew, commentary channels exploded, posts were analyzed, punctuations scrutinized, absences became evidence, allegations became identity, editing became motive. Once perception overtakes facts, the story gains autonomy. It wasn't just rumor anymore, it was strategy. The narrative transformed into mechanics, and the audience became investigators, dissecting episodes like forensic analysts. Every pause, every reaction, every framing became a piece of evidence. The contract rumor surfaced, quietly, subtly, without proof or documentation. A supposed understanding, not legally binding, not filed anywhere, just an unverified idea. Dangerous ideas breed stories. Stories morph into belief. Belief solidifies into certainty. Suddenly, the audience wasn't asking if something happened, they were asking who orchestrated it. And then came the realization. The drama wasn't breaking through the show, it was the show. Everything, from conflict to tension arcs, was consumed as a carefully orchestrated narrative. Production had become a suspect. Editing choices were analyzed with suspicion. Scenes were dissected, music cues scrutinized, moments emphasized or erased. Narrative manipulation, perceived or real, became the focal point. And the internet never stops. Fans created timelines, reconstructed sequences, compared interviews from years past, dissected smiles, laughter, and gestures with new eyes. Historical footage became evidence, context became weaponized, and past interactions were reinterpreted in light of the present chaos. Commentary channels and podcasters, claiming insider knowledge, further blurred lines, claiming, "It's deeper than you think, I've known for a while." Confidence without evidence pollutes perception, and narratives once established are unstoppable. Rumor evolved into strategy, contradictions became proof, silence became narrative, emotion became fact. Perception became more powerful than truth. The audience stopped asking, "Is it true?" and began asking, "What if it is?" And "What if" writes its own ending. Kandi wasn't battling a single allegation anymore. She was fighting mythology. Silence from one side, defiance from another, and a show that refused to explain gave viewers license to invent their own conclusions. Older footage was no longer nostalgic, it was forensic. Smiles, laughter, and gestures were scrutinized. Comment sections transformed from casual discussion into militant strategy rooms. Every post, every thread, every theory was a battlefield. And still, the story is unresolved. There is no conclusion, no confession, no contract, no verified receipt. Yet the destruction feels real, because online perception kills faster than truth. Reputation is judged in real time through comments, shares, and memory. Belief, once cemented, is impervious to evidence. 3 lives now exist in a story they cannot control. The moment a narrative escapes its source, it lives independently, feeding off speculation, rewrites, and public imagination. Clips once innocent become evidence. Context once ignored becomes critical. Rumors once ephemeral solidify into collective certainty. Then came silence. Not the quiet of resolution, not calm, that calculated, deliberate silence. For days, no cast members spoke publicly, no network statements emerged, no clarifications, no denials. Silence became louder than the original audio ever could. And when the absence of communication persists in a scandal of this magnitude, observers interpret it as hiding, as manipulation, as confirmation that something is deliberately being concealed. Insider posts claimed, "This season is getting recut." Edits, deletions, rearrangements. The implication was terrifying. Something on tape was dangerous, something needed protection, and something else needed to disappear entirely. When edits enter the equation, the narrative can be rewritten frame by frame. Heroes can be created, villains can be erased. The power of the cut is the power of control. And in this scenario, the control wasn't in the hands of fans. It wasn't in the hands of cameras. It was in the hands of those who knew exactly how damaging these revelations could be. By the 4th day, the quiet had transformed into something strategic. Behind locked doors, lawyers whispered. Production paused. Conversations that might have been innocent now carried weighty significance. Fans weren't asking what would happen next, they were asking who would act first: lawsuit, confession, denial, or public revelation. Every step in this drama was now an exercise in control. Every leak, every partial recording, every blurred surveillance clip was a chess move, and the players weren't children. They weren't casual cast members. They were adults navigating power, money, legal risk, and legacy. The first audio wasn't just a reveal, it may have been a misdirection. The second recording, a warning. Each piece of evidence was designed to shape perception, and perception was the battlefield. Then came a private message. In a private story, a single message appeared. "It's not the tape you think." 7 words, not a clarification, not proof, but enough to terrify everyone involved. Because if the leaks weren't what they seemed, someone was guiding the fire, and whoever controls the fire controls where it burns. By now, it was clear to everyone watching. This story wasn't about pregnancy, it wasn't about drama, it was about power, about narrative control, about who leaves the table unscathed and who is burned in the version of history someone else chooses to tell. This wasn't just a rumor, it was a fracture, a moment where silence became louder than screaming. Every unanswered question became evidence, every absent statement became proof, and the lessons are chilling. Lies are loud, but truth moves quietly. Strategy often masquerades as chaos, and when control, privacy, and power collide, something always breaks. The tape isn't the full story. The messages aren't the full story. The recut season isn't the full story. And the people who suddenly stop talking, they're not silent by accident. They're silent because the stakes are higher than anyone outside that room can imagine. So stay alert. Watch carefully, subscribe, and remember, in this story, silence isn't peace. It's a warning, a prelude, and possibly the only clue to what comes next.